Uh, I'm Bob, and I think I just broke the arm off my chair.
That's an auspicious start, Bob.
Yeah, I can screw. I see the screw down there. Well, this was kind of going to be part of the Excellence in Yacht Design series, but I thought that the fact that I was going to take a bigger role this time, it'd be kind of tacky that if I invited myself to the Excellence in Yacht Design series. So Joe came up with the idea of this Beyond Design series, which would open us up in the future to a more varied group of guests. And I kind of like that idea. And given that I had just started to work with Andy and Mia on this new interior, and Andy was talking about Zoom stuff, and I said, well, you should talk to Joe. So Joe and Andy got together, and here we are.
Here we are.
Yep, here we are. So I'll tell you from my end of this, and then, no, I'm going to let Andy start.
All right. What do you want to know, Bob?
I just want you to sort of give a background on how we got here, and then I'll come in with my segment of it.
Cool. Yeah. So, well, those of you, I guess most of you know who we are. If not, Mia and I run 59 North. We do these offshore sailing passages, and we just recently got this Farr 65. That's going to be our new flagship. All kind of came together pretty quickly.
Yeah, in the fall.
In the fall, and we knew we were going to refit the whole boat because it's a race boat, and we actually saved it for a while before we announced it to our audience and to the people that sail with us, because it's definitely not the style that we saw the potential for. You know, we didn't want to tell people, here's a stripped out race boat with 14 bunks on it, folding pipe cots, and nowhere to sit in the salon.
And baby blue floor
and all this. Just, it wasn't the style that our crew had grown accustomed to,
or that we would like to,
or that we, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but it was a great shell of a boat to build into our perfect offshore boat. And I knew Bob had been on the podcast, and I mean, anybody that's into sailing at least knows who Bob is. And I had actually dealt with him before and done some work with the podcast. And me and I actually, you sailed a Saga 43 and a full Atlantic Circle.
Yep. Yeah.
So we had some familiarity with his designs, and I knew his style, and I knew that I knew that Bob would basically not let me get away with anything, because he would tell me if I was making a stupid mistake. So it was a natural fit to say, all right, hey, Bob, we're going to do this new interior. We have had shifting ideas on what that's going to be about, but I think we finally got there, which we'll talk about.
I think we had the core from the beginning, what we wanted. It was just a kind of a roundabout way how to get there.
Exactly. So that's where we're at, and it's been a really, I mean, this is everybody's dream project, to build their own boat, and you know, here we are. It's the most exciting thing I think we've done. It's so cool. And Bob, I think you emailed back like 10 minutes later, yep, I'll do it. This sounds exciting. Like, there was no question. And it's not like we went around and shopped this to other people. It was like, hey, Bob would be good at this. And he's like, yeah, sure, we'll do it.
Yeah, well, I'll do it sort of led to a Shitsky moment. But not long after that, when I realized what I'd agreed to do, I don't do remodels. Because the first thing is, it's not glamorous. Number two, you can't get drawings for some old boats. You just can't get drawings. And people that own these boats don't understand it. If I don't have accurate working drawings to base my remodel on, what I draw is just pie in the sky stuff. Or you spend a lot of time trying to put together a drawing that represents the boat you're going to be working with, and that's expensive. So I don't do remodels, but knowing Andy and Mia, I didn't want to turn it down. I didn't have any other work at the time, so I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs, just feeling like I've retired.
That's good timing then.
When I don't want to retire. I've been retired, put out to pasture, and I didn't like it. So I wanted something to keep me busy. And the more I understood about what I was going to do, the more I understood it was a challenge. And the more I understood it was a challenge, the more it appealed to me. And I knew that had it been easy, anybody could have done this. But I felt honored that Andy and Mia asked me to do it. And it's been fun. I can tell you that where we began and where we ended up, there's been a lot of revisions. You see on the drawings I'll show you, the current ones are revision N. But what you don't realize is between revision A and revision B, there may be 3 other revisions that don't really qualify to get a name. So we sort of explored everything in great detail. And we had it all laid out just about right. Then Andy popped up one day and I said, want to flip it all 180 degrees, which if you were drawing by hand would have been awful. Would have been, 3 days of drafting. But with AutoCAD, you just hit a button that flips it. So that wasn't hard. And the rest has been fine tuning, getting in components that are off the shelf components like the stove and the refrigerators rather than building them in. And one of the biggest challenges was dealing with the existing structure because there's bulkheads and floors and structural items that we can't just take a sawzall to. But in the end, it's worked out pretty well. Why don't you pop up that first drawing, Joe?
Sure, give me 1 second.
Yeah, now, one of the things when I talked about having drawings, Andy and I discussed that, and I think Andy got a hold of the Farr office first, and they said they'd be happy to provide the drawings, and they did, and I asked for more drawings, and they sent more drawings, so they were extremely helpful in getting this thing started. So here is the interior.
So Bob, just to interject for a second, a little fun little backstory here. So I actually bought the Farr, they had a set of drawings, not the CAD drawings. I probably could have gotten them if I'd asked for them, but a set of PDF drawings that I bought, I think for $750 or something before we even bought the boat. Cause I knew like, I think this is going to happen and these are going to come in really handy. And a neat little sort of sidebar to that is the Farr office is in Annapolis, which is where I grew up sailing out of on the Chesapeake. And my dad, where he keeps his sailboat currently, is within sight of the Farr office. And I've actually been in the Farr office and interviewed Patrick Shaughnessy, who now is the lead designer there, because they did the Volvo 65s. And I interviewed him for the podcast years ago about this. So we already had this connection. And that's one of the things I love about this project so much is these small little connections that I've made over the course of our career are like coming to fruition now in a real project. It's not just I'm sitting down talking to you about your career. It's like, hey, let's build something together here. And I just have to pinch myself that we actually have the opportunity to do that, because it's just such a cool thing. And all this stuff is connected. It all comes full circle.
Yeah. So what was the race this boat was designed for originally?
Yeah, so the backstory of the boat, around 1999, when the Clipper race, which is this round the world race with amateur crew, that had been going for a bit. Then they started the BT Challenge race, which was Che Blythe. They went 67-foot steel boats, went the wrong way around the world in the Southern Ocean, so upwind. And that was a competitor to Clipper. And then one of the guys, I believe it was, the story that I heard anyway, Alex Thompson, who got his career started as a Clipper race skipper, one of his crew on his Clipper boat said, hey, we could do this ourselves. I'll back it. So they started a business commissioned this design by Farr, and the idea was that there would be 10 of these boats built and raced around the world over the millennium, so the year 2000. So the boat's actually called the Farr Millenium 65. In the end, they only had 4 of them built because I guess they built 4 for the race,
Okay.
and then a 5th one was built these ones were built in 99, and a 5th one was built to the same hull and deck but with a cruising interior, and that was actually Alex Thompson's first Hugo Boss, and that was launched I think in 2003. And incidentally, that boat now is owned by a guy here in Sweden who does charters on it, very similar to what we do. But again, it's the same boat, except it has an interior that was built completely different from this, has like a sort of a Pullman double style bunk forward, and it's a lot nicer inside, but has less functionality. So when we saw this is like, there's nothing to it. It's the perfect opportunity for us to take, for our business, we have a very specific mission case. We want to sail efficiently and comfortably across oceans with a lot of people, but we're not racing. And there doesn't exist a boat on the market that is under that mission case. Even our Swan 59 has lots of bunks, but it also has a lot of wasted space because it has a huge master cabin aft and a lot of features that aren't a benefit to the way we sail the boat. So this is what the goal was with this, is take it from a race boat into exactly what we want for our mission, and it'll be the only thing like it.
Right. I think what struck me when I saw this drawing is I don't think I've ever seen a boat that was more symmetrical than this. I mean, this boat it's literally the port side is just a mirror image of the starboard side, and which made things easier, I think.
Well, I guess that would have been down to like ease of building, because if you look even on this drawing, the heads are a mirror image such that I think they were built as pods outside the boat and then just installed, one flipped, but each pod could be used on either side. Like they just built, 10 identical head pods and then just plopped them into the boat. It didn't matter which side they were put on because it's a mirror image.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course the structure is mirror image, and the structure is used for the front of the lower bunks, and we using that for the edge of the counters and settee seat. So that's where we started, and then it became a job of chopping out the parts we weren't going to use, and we went back and forth if we keep the 2 midship heads and turn the forward head into a big wet locker. And we ended up eliminating the starboard head, midships head, turning the forward, keeping forward head, and turning the starboard head space into a nav station. And the nice thing about that, it was a nice generous space for a nav station for a change. So we were lucky there. I've got a seat big enough for 2 and tons of room for gear.
Well, that was, I got to give you credit for that, because I wanted a nav station all along. Everybody knows that's where you spend the most time on the boat. But I also thought we needed a wet locker, and we couldn't have everything. And I think giving up on that large wet locker and just living without that is, I think, going to make a huge difference in how we enjoy the boat. I think I would have really regretted not putting a nav station in, knowing how much I use it on our current boats, and you and all of us. It's a space for us, since they're working passages, it's a space for us to mingle with the rest of the crew, but separate, not having to be on top of each other. And that's really appealing.
Yeah. We went around, when I first drew the big U-shaped dinette, I put big round corners in it, and it looked real pretty with the big radius corners. Then Andy came back, I don't want radiuses, I want sharp corners. And I thought, wow, he thinks like I think, because I realized some years ago that big round corners and round dinettes look real sexy on a drawing, but in real life, they don't work.
Yeah, the corner is where you spend the most time sitting.
Yeah,
that's
my,
what
my theory is the human body seeks corners. It's just a natural thing. And if somebody disagrees with me, like I got into a little bit with Chuck Payne, he wasn't so convinced. I said, okay, next time you go below with friends, watch where they sit. And I was staying on a Diana 65, not my design, once during the NAP show. And it had a round dinette. And I was by myself on the boat. So I went down one night with my bottle of wine and turned the TV on and sat there on the round dinette. I started at one end. And about an hour later, I realized I had scooted around on this round dinette until I was at the other end of the dinette. And I realized that's my body looking for a spot where I can be comfortable. And it was just going to spit me out on the other end of the dinette. Because there was no corner there. So I'm a believer in corners.
It was interesting on our on the Swan 59. It had cushions that were so it was a square wooden furniture shape, but the corner cushions were extra thick and they were rounded. And thankfully, we were able to, when we had the new covers made for the cushions, we told the cushion guy, hey, you got to get rid of these curves in the corners. These are terrible. So they were able to do that via the cushions without having to rebuild any structure. And it made the whole the salon on the 59 10 times better. It was a huge, huge difference.
And it opens up a little bit more elbow room as well when you have a corner.
Yeah.
When you're
Those were probably expensive cushions.
They were indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. We've got what doesn't show up real obviously on the drawing is where the sinks are big sinks. We've got two of them. And
do we have the current iteration?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Can we turn that 90 degrees, Joe?
I think I can.
There you
Let's
go.
go this way.
There we go.
there you go.
Now, can we squeeze it down a little bit, maybe? Or you can just zoom into the.
All right,
Yeah.
So there you see our hard corners on the settee, and our sinks. And then above the sink, we have a hanging locker that hangs over the sinks, which,
That's this one.
Yeah, and you can see it in upper right.
yeah.
I'll zoom in a little bit. Does that help?
I can't remember what my last. Oh,
Now
shit.
I think this is it. You can see it in the top right. If you scroll up to the top right in the profile view to the right, you can see the locker hanging down above, kind of splits the difference between the sinks and the settee there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I had one of those oh shit moments the other night, in the middle of the night, woke up, no place for garbage. And I laid there, and then finally, oh, I've got to get up. I got up and then realized that we've got a ton of room under those sinks. It's just like you'd have in a house.
Yep.
We went with higher countertops than you'd have in a home. Well, we raised them 2 inches, right? 38 inches.
Mhm.
So we've got plenty of room for the garbage. Plenty of room for the stove swing. Because I was working with the front of that where the stove is, that black square. You can see I'm lined up with that structural floor there. And the door forward, that's there now. The only thing that I haven't changed on this one is that little alcove area forward into that bulkhead.
Yeah.
That can actually go as high as we want it to go. Because there's nothing restricting that being higher if we do that. The rest all just sort of worked out. The boat has remarkable headroom.
What is headroom? Do you know?
I don't know what it is measured, but it's got to be 7+ feet.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, in the galley,
6, 8 anyway.
88 inches.
Yeah, there you go.
What is that?
Well, 72 is 6 feet plus 12 is
7'4".
84. Yeah, 7'4". There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7 foot.
Now that'll decrease if we end up doing a headliner a little bit, but we got tons of room.
Mm.
Yeah, well, you should be able to do a headliner with 4 inches, and that would give you 7 feet of headroom.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I should note, Bob, when we were looking into the galley equipment, the sinks and the stove specifically, the one goal of this boat is to do it full lithium and get rid of the propane. So we have an induction stove and an electric oven. And there's this company in England called GNE Space, and they basically make, it's really cool. They make, it looks just like a propane stove and oven, and it's gimbaled and everything, but it's fully electric / induction. And then they make a bunch of accessories, including the sinks, so that all the trays and stuff that slide in the oven fit perfectly in the sinks, and it all kind of works together. So we use 2 of their largest sinks next to each other, and then the stove and everything. Then they're gonna come. It's gonna come with like these. We picked out some trays for lasagna and stuff, because cooking for 10 people, you're gonna need some space, because we're gonna be 10 people normally on these trips, 2, a skipper and a mate and 8 crew. So that was kind of cool that all that galley stuff worked together. And I'm excited to see how that works in practice, because that's a challenge on our boat now. We're only 8.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 more people. That's a lot of more food.
Yeah.
We could extend that galley counter further aft. It's just a matter of how tight you want that clearance to be with the companionway ladder.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking if we did that, extend that counter aft, you could put a top loading trash can in the end of that. Was where, because I had the same thought about trash as you. So that's an idea, because remember too, the way we use the boat, large spaces are actually a disadvantage, because you want to be able to wedge yourself in as you're moving around the boat, because 99% of the time we're actually at sea and underway. So, and that's the biggest problem we have with the 59 right now, is there's too much space in the main salon, and it's an injury hazard in not even rough weather, but moderately rough weather, or if the boat's heeled over hard. So I'm less concerned about the space, so long as there's enough space to pass through, obviously. But that's kind of another consideration.
Maybe you could mock that up. Go for a minimal passage through, I would go 24 inches. But in this case, you're talking about a 38-inch high counter, and then you've got companionway, essentially a ladder on the other side. So the only time you're talking about the real clearance is right at the bottom of the ladder.
At the floor.
We could close that up even more than 24 inches, depending on how you feel when you mock it up. But don't forget, we've got those 2 tie rods in there that we can't move.
Well, the one's already in there in the galley. If you look at that plus sign just to the left of that aft sink,
right?
I mean, that's not going to make a difference. That's going to be there regardless. And if we extend the countertop, that's not going to matter for that.
Okay, it might impede the volume you have for the trash, though.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And we looked at getting rid of those and decided we probably shouldn't do it.
Well, the other thing we talked about was that we wanted to have so there's 2 refrigeration areas on this boat. One you can't see in the drawing because it's aft of the engine. It's a very large top loader fridge freezer combo that is like under the cockpit behind the engine, so to the left of this drawing. And then the galley, what we're calling the day fridge, is one of those isotherm drawer style fridges. And we were worried before, in one of the iterations of this, the galley counter where the sinks are didn't extend out far enough. So if the galley were to be on the high side, the drawers of that isotherm are opening into space, would have opened into space, which would have caused all kinds of trouble with crew trying to get stuff out of it. So we wanted to extend the galley counter far enough aft so that you could lean against it while also opening the refrigerator, and also have it as like a stop. Like the fridge drawers can't go past that galley because it overlaps, past that counter because it overlaps just enough. So that's kind of a subtle thing that's pretty specific to the way we use the boat, why we did it that way.
Yeah, well, if we went with that 24-inch dimension for clearance, we could move that counter 12 inches aft.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think
I mean,
that's
that's
I think
like-
that's no, I think
It's like
that's
almost
a
a ruler.
foot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think that's a no-brainer to me.
Okay, I'm gonna do it while we're talking.
So
That's like-
Mia, what did you think while Bob's doing that? What was, because you guys that are watching this too, you know, it's hard to look at this stuff on a drawing and visualize what it's going to be like there. And before we started this process, I had been on the boat twice,
Yeah.
but you hadn't.
Mhm.
So what was it like for you? Because you had already seen this drawing and the original when you saw the boat for the first time. So what was like the impression of what you expected to feel like when you were in the boat versus what it felt like in
I
reality?
think one thing that is hard to see in a drawing is the feel of the headroom, the volume, because I think the lower the ceiling is, the more cramped the space feel.
Yeah, no
So
matter
I
how
feel
big
like
it is.
just because of the headroom being so high, it felt much bigger and didn't feel cramped. And I actually thought it was a bigger space than I expected, because a lot of the photos that people had taken was kind of like with the fisheye, which makes the center more narrow and the sides more wide.
Yeah.
So it felt more narrow down there from the photos, just because they were taken with that wide angle lens. And when you came down there, I think it felt bigger. And I think realizing, looking then at the new drawings, that it's going to be the settee, I mean, the what do you call the couch? The settee is going to be plenty big for the space we have.
Yeah.
It's not going to be able to sit 10 people, but that's not a plan.
That's
It's going to be
exactly.
big enough. It's going to be bigger than it looks on there, I think.
And the reason we flipped the layout, originally we had the galley on port, just, I don't even know why, it was just, that's what felt right. But the door to the forward head, there previously were two pass-throughs because everything was symmetrical, like Bob was saying. So you could walk from the center section to the forward section, either port or starboard. But by putting the salon on starboard, it blocked that door off, and the head door, or what used to be the wet locker, is on starboard. So it didn't make sense to have the opening to the forward cabin on port for those that were going to go into that head to have to walk forward and all the way around.
Yeah.
So that was the main reason we flipped it, so that the pass-through and the door to the head are on the same side, just to minimize the traffic for the people that are using that head coming from the aft cabin.
It is funny though, because when we all the first drawings were the galley on port and the settee on the starboard. And when we came down on the boat, it was very hard for me to get my head around that the galley was going to be on starboard, because I had envisioned in my head that it was going to be on port from the first. I think the first drawing you get is what gets stuck in your head.
Yeah.
So it took a little time to get used to that. But
Bob, I like too how you and I, when we were talking about there's only going to be one set of drawers in the galley, and you were asking me about how I thought about the drawer design, and we both kind of agreed that make them bigger than they should be, because it's nothing worse than getting the potato masher stuck in the drawer so you can't open it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've drawn this up, and it makes a huge difference because it brings that inboard counter now almost to the bulkhead separating the nav station from the galley.
That's perfect.
Yeah, and the question now is, do we extend that inboard leg of the dinette forward the same amount? Or do we leave it pushed back a bit?
The inboard leg of the dinette.
Like,
Yeah, not the table, the seat. Yeah, the seat.
do we pull the whole thing forward like we had it before, or do I keep the seat starting where it is now? My inclination is to leave the seat as is.
Mine is too, because if you think about it this way, you know, the closer to the companionway that seat is, the more potential for it to get wet.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
So I would leave it where it is, and then you have kind of you have then a space to lean. You can, when you come down the steps, you can lean on that extended counter while you're standing, and the seat's not going to be in your way. You can be standing, that's maybe a good place to put shoes on or something, even as you're getting dressed to go outside.
Yeah.
So I think we leave it.
yeah, I would say so.
That's good, because that gives us aft of that aft sink, that gives us 2 feet of clear countertop.
Wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
That's huge. How we
So-
thought of it.
Bob, I asked you this on email. I said I want to talk about this. You said you don't do remodels. You know, I think I mentioned there's this idea that like creativity sometimes is easier to spark when you're constrained by something. How do you think about that? You know, given this situation where you are constrained about something, have you felt constrained, or have you felt more creative within those constraints?
Well, kind of think of it a little bit like Mozart and Beethoven, Brahms. You know, they confined themselves to the sonata form for their symphonies. And like I used to tell the Cub Scouts when I was a Cub Scout leader guy, in discipline there is freedom. I think I made that up, but it sounded good. So I think my worst nightmare is somebody not giving me any constraints. So they just leave me to my own devices. I'm a pretty boring guy, and pretty easy to please. But it's like I did a catamaran for a guy whose wife was in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make it ADA compliant. Well, there's a whole bunch of restrictions that come along with that.
Yep.
But it's like working with the IOR rule or a rating rule, right? It just becomes part of the game.
Yeah.
And in the end, what looks like brilliant design work turns out to be a reaction to constraints. So I have no problem with constraints.
So let me ask you this then. If I had come to you and said, and I in fact did come to you a couple of years ago when we considered looking into building our own boat, if I had come to you and said, hey, Bob, I want a 65-foot boat that is very efficient to sail, that there's no compromises on the sailing side of it as far as the deck layout and the performance is concerned, that's going to sail with 10 people comfortably, how would that have been much different than this? What would have been different, if anything? How would you have approached that from a blank slate?
Yeah, everything would have been different. I don't know. I can't think about things like that unless I'm drawing.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
I have to draw while I think. Not. I would take about 6 dog walks before I could sit down and start drawing.
That's fair.
Yeah. That would
Is
be-
there anything, is there, you know, I think both Mia and I have had fairly strong opinions on what we've wanted and how we wanted this to be. Is there anything that I've suggested that you've done reluctantly, but done anyway because it's what I wanted, or are we more or less on the same page?
Can't talk now. Call me later. Bye. What was that again?
No, I said, you know, I've been fairly demanding and we've been through so many iterations of this. I wonder if there's anything that I've been like, no, I want it this way, but you've done it begrudgingly, even though you think there was a better way. Is it, or are we more or less on the same page now at this final iteration?
When we made the first big change to the layout, where I started and laid it out, and you said, no, let's try this. I sort of thought, no, that's not the right way to go.
Yeah.
But I did it anyway, and then you realized that wasn't the right way to go. But for the most part, you've been easy. I mean,
That's good.
you've been very easy. I don't mind changes, and because they're all refinements and improvements, and you know what you want. Sometimes I deal with clients that they don't know what they want until they see what they don't want.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a problem and a little awkward for me. But you've had everything you've suggested made sense. And when you decided to flip it back to this basic layout, that made sense. And then just flipping it port for starboard like we did to get easier access to the door, to the head. Had a lot of people question me about that on the fan club page, but that makes sense. It just makes, I mean, I kicked myself for not seeing that earlier.
Yeah, it wasn't my idea. I can't take credit. It was somebody from your fan club page that said, I think they said flip it for a different reason. But then when I realized what else it would give us, I was like, oh yeah, this is a good idea.
Well,
what do you think, Bob, about there's a walkthrough in the galley? Is that a big no-no normally, or what do you think about that?
it's not a no-no. You know, I've done countless boats with aft cabins that the only way to get to the aft cabin is through the galley. All the bigger passports are that way. Tiana 52, Tiana 48. You're walking through the galley. I've never had anybody complain.
Yeah.
It makes for a good galley. And in a lot of those cases where they're going to an aft cabin, that it's bordering the engine space too. So it sort of works in as a natural for where the engine is, which we don't have to deal with. But no, walking through there, and we don't have a minimal space there. We've got 28 inches, where normally you'd settle for 24, but we've got 28 3/4 through there. So that's it'll be fine.
Yeah.
I want to, Joe, if you're still running the screen here, if you can scroll up and to the left to show the profile view looking forward. Maybe no, it's not that one. That's with the nav station. That's a pretty good one too there, but that one there on the right, the top right is what I wanted to start with. What convinced me, Bob, to go back to this layout was what you said in one of our first emails, that having that salon would give you a nice visual feeling when you come down below. And I love that this profile view to show the salon with the books behind it. And that, I think, is exactly what we needed to change from the racy boat feeling to like, okay, this is a purposeful, clearly a cruising boat. And I think that drawing, I think it really shows that.
Yeah, nothing says cruising like books.
Yeah, exactly. Big, fat, heavy books.
Yeah, big, fat, heavy books. Yeah.
And then the same thing, if you scroll over to the nav station view, Joe, that was like, got me really excited when I got to see that in the profile view, because I know that's where I'm going to spend most of my time. And the nice thing about the way the structure on the boat is, they need to pull out everything from inside the head, but the two bulkheads will remain. All they have to do is take off the front panel, which is basically two cuts on the side there. So there's a minimal amount of work to get that nav station to be like that. And I'm really, really excited about that as well. And also for crew, I mean, there is a nav station on the boat aft in the captain's cabin, a tiny little phone booth size nav station.
On the race boats.
Yeah, but it's inaccessible to the crew. And a big part of our passages is coming off watch and sitting down and writing the log and plotting on the paper chart twice a day. And I think we'd have been missing a big part of the experience, not to mention the selfishness of having our own space, but I think it's going to add to the experience having that nav station.
Hey, Andy, what have you thought about doing differently, in creating a boat specifically for training passages as opposed to a standard cruising boat? Like what were your main considerations? I know bunk space is one of them, but what other considerations did you have there?
Well, Mia, do you want to start?
Well, I think the difference is, I think, that we have a large amount of people offshore sailing, so we need to optimize the sailing function for the boat, because when we are in port, most time it's only 1, 2, 3 people on the boat. It's very rare that we are in port for multiple days with a lot of people. So I think having,
even in the Azores, we had a weather delay, and since we had a delay and weren't going anywhere, everybody got off the boat and went ashore in hotels and enjoyed the town.
Yeah. So I think that's a big difference, that we have more people offshore than in port. So, and we're sailing often, and most people who have a cruising boat, they may do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 offshore passages a year that are long, and then maybe a couple hops. But we actually do like 10, 15 week-long offshore passages. So the sail, it needs to be truly optimized for offshore sailing.
Yeah, I'd second that. And the fact that too, when the boat is sitting and you're living on it, it's only the skipper and mate. So all of a sudden, a boat that's designed for 10, you only have 2 people on it. So, you know, that galley and salon is going to be luxurious for 2 people when they're living on the boat in between trips. So
I think too, if it would be more like a charter boat where you're spending a lot of time on the boat, on anchor in port, you need to optimize and have an even bigger salon, maybe 2 spaces where people can sit. But for us, I think we only need 1 space because not everyone is going to be sitting down all the time. But we want to emphasize that feel of being able to have a hangout place.
yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. It's a good question.
Yeah, everything's designed with the idea that it's going to be in motion and healed over.
Yeah.
And how is that going to work under those circumstances?
I mean, Iceberg, for example, the Swan 59 we have is amazing in port because it's big open space and it's a lawn. And
It's like an apartment.
yeah, it's great to be living on, and you can be a lot of people in the port. But then as soon as you start sailing and the floors get slippery with water, that space just becomes too big. And I think that's why this boat is going to be much more up. This boat is not going to work for many people except us, I think.
No, exactly. It's a very, very specific use case.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about this boat too is we're only changing the interior. You know, we haven't talked about the deck stuff, but the deck layout, everything on deck is optimized for sailing. And it's just so much fun to sail. And Bob, I know you feel pretty strongly about having travelers in the right place and sail controls. And this is the logical evolution of that you can do whatever you want and you're not in anybody's way doing it. And it's so fun to sail.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
So no changes top size to anything, huh?
We're not changing anything topsides other than we're actually going to probably add a second grinding pedestal on the main sheet because we have the space for it. And I happen to have one in my friend's basement in the US. But other than that, everything's going to stay the same. It'll just get refurbished,
yeah.
you know, new non-skid and all that stuff. But the deck layout will stay exactly the same. We're going to put a Dodger on it, but it was designed to have a space for Dodger. So
Yeah. I'm changing the drawings. I'm working.
Well, Bob's working, we're all talking.
Sounds about right.
There was a question that came in via chat from Stephen Brumfield, and he said, what are the advantages of the large U-shaped dinette? He's intending to redo his this year, and he wants to make it easier to access the back portion.
Bob, do you want to take that one? Did you hear that?
He's working. He's busy.
He's not
I think
listening.
we have to do talking.
Well,
Go
I'm not
ahead.
sure I understand the question, but it is a pain in the butt slithering into that middle section of the U. Like there's no doubt about it. When you're squirming in and out of the settee, like you're not the guy that's going to be serving seconds after dinner because you're stuck. That's what he means.
Stephen, you can unmute yourself and expound on the question.
Well, that's Andy hit it exactly. It is very hard. You know, I'm a 51-year-old guy, and I have to walk on the furniture on this boat to get back to the back of the dinette, et cetera. And I find that we just don't sit back there because it's such a pain in the ass to get back there. So I was intending to like put folding leaves or something on the table so that I could get back there easier.
Well,
But I don't want to do anything and screw up because I'm only doing it once. So.
I think a folding leaf on a table is excellent because then you get that space for your legs when you need it, but then you can also have a.
Unless something's on the table, then you're constantly picking stuff up to do it.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah.
There never is. It'll have fiddles or something on it.
Yeah.
I remark on this all the time when I'm doing my reviews for sailing. You don't want to be that first guy in, and but if you back up and look at it, there really is no other option if you want to seat that many people. That's the way it's got to be. I mean, what happens is if you got a 37-footer or a 40-footer, you can do nice settee berths down each side with a drop leaf table in the middle, and everybody's a happy camper. But as the boat gets bigger and beamier, you run into this area where the drop leaf would have to be 4 feet wide.
Yeah.
So that's not going to work. So you end up putting the whole dinette seating area to one side, and then something else happens. So the beam comes back to bite you rather than help you in a situation like that. You know, maybe you could have pilot bursts both sides and then big deep settees, but you so often end up with the U-shaped dinette because it's the most effective way to seat the people. But no, I don't want to be the first guy in there.
Or in our case, you do, because then you're not
75.
asked for anything.
Yeah, there's a flip side to that.
Mia's comment about the slippery floors was very impactful because I've certainly experienced that. And I'm sure Herman Freer has put the dinette in my boat where he did for a reason. I just don't want to do something that I want to reverse later.
What is your boat?
She's a Beneteau Idol 43, a 1350.
Okay, cool.
She's an Annapolis boat. You may have seen her down there before.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, you don't want to make too big of a space down below.
Well, I can guarantee you that wasn't Herman Frere's call. That was Beneteau's call. I doubt he had anything to do with that interior.
Yep. Thank you.
Is there any more questions, I think, maybe?
Yeah, if you have a question, just unmute yourself and ask it. Otherwise, I'll ask Mike the next question, which is, where do you plan on doing your passages on this vessel? All up north?
Well, it's basically, I mean, we planned so far in advance that 2023 was already kind of planned out under the assumption that Ice Bear would, so this is what happened. Yeah, so we were supposed to do this OGR around the world race that was going to start in the end of 2023, and that was going to be on the Swan 59, and this all kind of happened at the same time, where we bailed out of that for many of good reasons, and then we bought the boat very soon after that. So we kind of adapted the calendar that we had already published for 2023, because we'd already had some people signed up for it, to this boat. But so we only have 1 year scheduled so far, and we're kind of
In 23, we're planning on, so the refit is starting to happen at the moment, and hoping to be done in August, but we don't have a passage on this boat until March next year. So we have a lot of time to wiggle it out before we actually really leave it.
I think the idea is that we'll add a passage or two in the fall of 2022, but
And it's
stay
based in England at the moment.
Yeah, stay close to England so that we can go back to the boatyard that's doing the refit for any warranty work, and then we'll cross the Atlantic in March of 23
February, March.
via the trade wind route to the Caribbean, stay pretty much hightail it straight north, and then we're going to come back by the Viking route, which I've always wanted to do. So we're going to go like up to Annapolis from the Caribbean, then Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and then Newfoundland to Iceland via the Prince Christian Sound on the southern tip of Greenland. So that'll be one continuous trip. That'll be 3 weeks via that, the so-called Viking route. And then we'll go down to Ireland and Portugal. So we'll do basically the first year of this boat, we'll see probably about 15,000 miles via this large Atlantic circle. And then beyond that, I mean, now that we're not doing OGR, I would say probably 2025 realistically is when we'll go to the Pacific. And that's been something we've wanted to do. I have a couple calendars sketched out for that. But I mean, really the beauty of what we do is the most fun part of our jobs is sitting down at the beginning of planning a season with Google Earth and just saying, okay, how do we put this puzzle together? Because we can go anywhere. It's really, really exciting.
Yeah.
What happens if a crew member gets wacky on you?
Oh, they don't.
Knock on wood, that's never happened. And,
I think we're trying to be as truthful as possible what they sign up for, and I think that pays off.
Yeah, well, that's a credit to you guys, I think.
We tend to attract a very similar, I think we're so open with the stuff we put out in the world that we tend to attract a very like-minded group of people, not just necessarily like us, but like each other. It's a very,
I like the style that we sail.
yeah. And the joke, even though it's not a joke, is, most people come to us as individuals, And, you know, on our frequently asked questions page, we kind of have this straw man question. That's how do you know I'm going to get along with the rest of the crew? And the joke answer, but also the truth is that you have to.
So you don't get the guy coming down the dock with 3 suitcases?
Oh,
No, we haven't had any rolly bags yet, thankfully.
You
So,
tell people how much they can bring?
oh yeah, we have very specific packing lists, 70-liter bags and everything else. So
Yeah.
we have a pretty well oiled machine going here. It's been a lot of fun learning and setting it up. And that's the beauty of this. I think, Bob, like if I had come to you even 5 years ago, after only having sailed 2 seasons on our Swan 48, I don't think we would have wound up in this same place with this
No.
boat. I'm really happy that we have so much experience to draw on
And I think
doing the same
comments-
type of trips.
And comments from different people sailing with us.
Yeah.
And I saw we had some of the former crew and future crew in the chat. So it would almost be fun to hear their comments on the design.
Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's why we're doing it. In fact,
Oh.
Ben Shaw just asked a question.
Oh.
st-
Do you get- do you get repeat crew
Oh yeah.
for more trips?
Yeah, think I saw that both Jim Butler and Paul Kekalos are in the chat. At least they were in the Zoom, and they've been with us multiple times and coming up as well.
Yeah, the longer we do this, the more repeat crew we get, as you would imagine. We've
Yeah.
actually, my dad came up with a great slogan for our business. He's like, you should just sell your boat and sail with us. And a lot of people do that. I mean, like there's a major expense and hassle to maintaining a boat that is capable of going anywhere. And maybe it's used once or twice a year, and versus, you know, like my dad's about to sell his boat, which is a Vauquier Hood 38 that he's taken to the Caribbean several occasions, but he doesn't use it that way anymore. So he's gonna literally do what he said. He's gonna sell his boat, buy a day sailor for the Chesapeake that's more fun to sail on the bay, and continue sailing with us like he has anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's one of those sort of like, there's definitely something to boat ownership just to have it. I totally understand that. I mean, even all the boats we have in the business, we still have our own family boat here in Sweden. So I get that. But there's another sort of realistic side of it that says, well, for the amount of money it costs me to maintain and outfit an ocean going boat, I could sail with these guys for the rest of my life for twice a year.
Well, Joe and I
Literally had that discussion with both you and Bob today.
Yeah, right.
Hey, can I chime in as a repeat crew for a second? It's Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Paul, yes, please.
I just want to commend the overall decision for the nav station in general. I mean, I think as someone, you know, who pays to come on these trips with you guys and gets so much out of it, being able to sit down at the brains of the boat and, you know, even for that 5 minutes pre and post watch, kind of pretend, you know, well, not pretend, I mean, we're in that world, right? But to be able to sit there, like, that's the experience to me. And I was just really glad to see that change made.
Yeah, that was the final piece of the puzzle. And Bob said that from the very beginning, so he gets the credit for that
I
one.
think when we were on the boat all together, it was natural. It had to be there. We were
Yeah.
like, this is really gonna be missing. If we don't have this nav station, it is not gonna be the same experience coming down below. So
Yeah.
that's great to hear that, Paul.
Hey guys, this looks like it'd be a really fun boat to join in the Transpac or something like that. You got any ideas of doing some paid ocean racing?
Well, for sure. Yeah, that's one of the other nice things about this boat. It can do dual service.
We have done a couple Caribbean 600 races with our other Swan, and definitely some races in the future.
But I actually have a Sydney Hobart on one of our Pacific calendars, and I think I might have a Transpac on there as well, because one of my big Pacific dream is to sail to Japan. So I'd like to do a circumnavigation of the Pacific Basin via Japan and Alaska, and then you'd come back down, and then you do a Transpac back to Hawaii and do a couple loops in the Pacific, and then because we're not doing the OGR, our return from the Pacific 100% will be from New Zealand around the Horn to South America. So that is mark my words, that is happening. I just don't know when. Lots to do.
You got my undivided attention on that idea.
What's that?
You got my undivided attention on that idea. Awesome.
Yeah. So that's the nice thing. We'll probably do I tend to like to do like one major ocean race a year, just to kind of, I mean, racing's the best way to keep your sailing skills fresh, and it's a different kind of challenge. And, you know, it's just a fun thing that is fun for us. We did Gotland Runt on our little boat last summer in Sweden. I think we're going to do that again.
Our family boat.
Our family boat, sorry. No, I like the long ocean races. It's a fun challenge. So yeah, Transpac that's a good suggestion. And this boat will be fast in the Transpac. It's gonna be a fast downwind boat.
Absolutely. Thanks for that.
Cool.
Did you guys talk about toe spaces at all?
No, but I noticed that in your latest drawing that you had the toe space in the galley on the sink side.
Yeah, it's an expensive detail to build, I think, but it would be nice. It'd be at least nice on that one counter to have toe space.
You see what he's talking about?
Yeah.
Man?
Oh yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I forget. You know, I actually think the boat, as it was built originally, had toe space on those counters, because I had never considered that until you started talking about it, and I noticed it on when we were there sailing. So I'm pretty sure it had that on the galley spaces, if I'm not remembering incorrectly.
It would just need to run down that outboard side of the center counter. It wouldn't need to wrap around the whole thing.
Let me ask you this though. Here's a challenge for you. How do you, or do you, how do you incorporate foot pumps into the toe space area for the sinks?
Carefully.
Because there's got to be salt and freshwater foot pumps for sure, the way we use the boat.
Yeah.
Well, you could have a little section of where there was no toe space, and the pumps could be mounted in that. Might be a little awkward.
I'm wondering too, Bob, you mentioned about that we have a lot of width in the galley.
Yeah.
Are we going to have, I don't want to have too much width where you can't, like ideally you'd be able to lean your butt against the sinks on the counter side while you're cooking over the stove. Is that going to be, because we can do that right now on the 59 pretty well, where you can sort of wedge yourself in and from one side to the other. So as you have it designed now, is that going to work?
I don't think so. Depends how big your butt is, Andy.
You think it's too wide to do that?
It's 28 inches. So
Yeah,
you know,
I can't visualize that.
I can visualize it right here.
So is there what?
I don't know. It's probably 4 more inches than you've got now. So it wouldn't be the end of the world. You know what is limiting us there is that existing door.
Yeah, I know, because I'm just looking at that now. You have it designed kind of perfectly around that width of that door.
Yeah. So on the inboard counter, it can't come out any further without hitting the door. On the outboard counter, we could come in, you know, like 2 or 3 inches more. But
We should have Kate measure the iceberg so we get a feel for it.
That's a good idea. I'll ask her that right now.
Yeah.
when I'm drawing things like that on a project like this, I'm reluctant to snug things up to a 2-inch tolerance,
Yeah, I understand that.
because I don't want the builder to say, you know, guy's a dreamer. What's he smoking over there? You know, I can't do
Yeah.
this. But we, you know, theoretically, we could bring that outboard counter in 2 3/4 inches, which probably isn't going to make the difference in what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna ask and see what it is on iceberg. That would be interesting to
Just
just
to get
compare.
yeah, because I can visualize that space because
And
I've been
feel
in
it.
there before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it could be done. I mean, that the pantry locker at the forward end really can't come in, because I've got that in about as far as I can get, snug up to that door opening.
The thing is too, you're not gonna fall because it is right there.
No, you're not going to fall.
No.
But if you're trying to stand up and use 2 hands to cook, it would be.
Well, you
It
never
is
use
nice.
2 hands to cook.
Well, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah.
To do wash dishes, you do.
Mm.
I'm gonna mock it up.
Was it 20?
28 inches, yeah.
Let me look how many centimeters it is.
Well, maybe you can stick a pillow on the back of your pants.
Yeah, 71 centimeters.
Yeah, 28 inches, if you're reaching over to stir something at the stove, it's a little bit of a reach.
Okay,
Or-
here we go. Here's your answer, Bob. You had it right. Kate, who's on Ice Bear right now, measured the distance between the outboard countertop and the sink in the Ice Bear and the Swan 59 galley is indeed 24 inches.
That's
You
only
know
1
why?
decimeter.
You need that to mount a range stove,
Yep.
gimbaled stove, so they're almost always 24 inches. So have her pretend like it's 28 inches and see what she thinks.
You can do that. You're going there
I
next
can
week.
cut off 10
You
centimeters.
can cut
on
off
the-
10 centimeters in your head. Yeah.
That's a good thought, though.
Yeah.
Bob, we got the third PDF here too. Is there something on there that you wanted to show the crew?
Sure.
All right.
Orient this the correct way here.
Of course, these drawings are all obsolete now. We changed that counter, but this is just the starboard inboard profile, which shows the nav station and the drawer reefers and crew bins forward and how the galley's set up and the drawers.
There, I can see in the bottom section there, you have the pantry going the full height above the sinks.
Yeah. You gonna do that?
I mean, why wouldn't we?
Where?
I don't know. You're gonna need all the pantry you can get, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Especially if I come
What did you
aboard.
say, Andy? Where?
Here, this space.
Yeah.
It's just a hollow space that's otherwise unused.
Yeah, no, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect for snacks or whatever.
Yeah.
Plates. Let's see what we're gonna fit in.
Go up to the starboard profile section there. This is how we've looked at this before, but there's your drawers to the left of the stove, the pull out fridge and
2 small
freezer.
drawers and a biggest drawer. Is that
One
correct?
big drawer, 2 small drawers,
that's
and then all the
perfect.
locker. That's Bob. That's all Bob. I had no input on that,
mean,
but
I
I
think
think it works. I think it looks
That's
cool.
all you need, because you need one for cutleries, you need one for what do you call silverware that you eat with, and one drawer for stuff that you cook with.
Yeah,
So that's perfect.
I love that nav station. Now that's going to be so nice.
And then you have pens and navigation tools in those drawers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got that. There's a lot of volume under that seat too.
Heck yeah.
I wonder if we're gonna need that for batteries.
This is
I was
insane.
just going to ask that.
Just need to balance it.
I mean, the thing is, like, all the volume under the nav seat and the settee, the new settee, except for the outboard portion, which has a water tank under it, that's all new volume. None of that was there before, so it's not used for anything. We can use it for whatever we want.
Yeah, that's that locker above the sinks, that vertical locker. That's not cutting into the bulkhead. That's, if you look at how the bulkhead really takes that box around the mast there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not cutting into that bulkhead. It's built onto that.
No, exactly. Yeah, I understood that. Yeah. Cool.
It's gonna be exciting just to see the differences.
Like I said, we're committed now. The old
Yeah.
interior is already ripped out of the boat. So
Someone should take a photo of it then.
yeah.
Yeah, you should have them take a shot every afternoon when they quit work.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool too. Those of you guys that are listening that follow the podcast, we had Pip Hare on the podcast before she did the Vendée Globe a couple years ago, and this boat, when it goes into the shed for the refit, is going to be parked right next to her new Medallia Open 60. So we're in good company over there. It's pretty neat.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben said about the galley
Yeah,
strap.
and I think the galley strap is almost, I would never use one. I think they're dangerous because if something happens, I don't want to be strapped to the stove.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, they think they're more pain than they're worth.
Well, if you guys have any more questions, we got to hit the road soon. It's 7 o'clock here and we haven't eaten dinner yet, but happy to take another question or two. Or Joe, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah.
This is
No, I
really
was just
fun.
gonna-
Thanks for setting this up.
Oh, you're welcome. I was just gonna ask if anybody else wanted to chime in here.
Must have covered everything.
In
Well,
an
Bob, we'll
hour.
be in touch, I'm sure, sending more emails back and forth. And whenever you get that new counter style arrangement finished, I'd love to see that. So we'll see what the next iteration. How many more iterations? See if we can get to the letter Z.
Yeah, no, it's done. I finished it. Finished
Cool.
it.
Well, Bob, you're lucky. In Sweden, we have more letters.
I don't know if he's lucky.
And O.
Yeah, 3 more
As
letters.
long as we have more letters for the design than COVID.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll sign off. This will be Joe. You'll have to keep in touch and send me the recording of this, and we'll put it up there on our stuff. And thanks for doing this. This is really fun.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, this was great, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Andy and Mia.
Thanks,
Yeah, thanks,
Bob. Good to
everyone.
see you again. Good to see everybody.
Have a great day. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.